This is Chris Parker with the Business Simplicity Podcast. I am having a conversation with Michael Paik, who's coming in from Seoul in Korea, and he is the general counsel for Bobble AI. And he's also the founder and CEO of GRC Solutions, which he's educating organizations on risk management systems and compliance in general. And what an incredible wealth of knowledge. We really dove into what does AI potentially mean for in-house lawyers, in-house counsel. And we talked about how it could apply to younger starters as well as the head, the GC of an organization at a management level, and got into some education and what it can really mean for lawyers. It's fascinating. So, Michael, why would this be valuable for people to listen to it?
So, in a nutshell, for lawyers in particular, I think that hopefully it will provide uh, lawyers with the confidence that they are actually surprisingly competent with AI, with a few considerations and deliberations that they need to think about in terms of how they engage with it. But because of the way we were trained, the work that we do, it's a wonderful new tool, and there's no need to be afraid of it.
The Business Simplicity Podcast, where we learn about strategies and tactics to succeed through simplicity. With your host, Chris Parker.
Welcome back to the Business Simplicity Podcast. This is Chris Parker, and I'm having a conversation with Michael Paik, who is in Korea, in Seoul. And he, like me, is a bit of a portfolio professional where he is involved in a number of things. And the two main things is he's general counsel for Bobble AI, which I believe is in auditing and certifying AI systems, which is, I'm sure we're going to unpack that and see what that means, as well as the founder and CEO of GRC Solutions, which is a training, education, consulting in risk management and compliance. And so, and the invitation today is to start to peel back the onion on what can AI mean for the legal profession? And I'm excited about this. And to make it a bit more personal, we're going to talk about what this can mean for the younger lawyers. And one of my sons has the aspiration to be a lawyer. And he also has dyslexia. So I'm also curious to see how, I'm just curious, Michael has ideas about that. And I'm going to share this with him as a insight into what the future of lawyering, of the legal profession, can be in the age of AI. So I'm just super excited about this. But before we get into the content, Michael, can you share a little bit about what you're doing with Babel and GRC? And
Sure.
maybe a little bit, how did you get there? Like, why are you so busy with this stuff? Because you're
I,
extremely passionate
prob-
and busy.
I probably should start from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I studied economics in college, studied a little bit of operations research in Japan after college, but ended up going to business school. After which I went to law school. But I went to law school with the business school mindset, kind of a management mindset. And as many of your listeners may know, law schools primarily teach kind of a guild uh, approach towards litigation, and it's not really applied in terms of corporate transactions and what businesses need. So you have to figure that out after you leave. So I started practicing in New York on Wall Street in kind of the junk bond high yield debt market, and then went to California back in '98 with the first dot-com boom. And I was in Palo Alto, Silicon Valley for a while before returning to Korea. I couldn't find work in venture capital, which was my focus in Silicon Valley. So I started pivoting to developing risk management systems for large Korean companies. So tires to begin with, shipbuilding, steel, most recently. And so this was kind of a sweet spot for me in that ultimately you're developing risk management systems with the focus on legal. And so that's kind of what I did for 20 years upon returning to Korea. And part of that was learning about different systems for doing so, whether it's COSO or ISO, or in one case it was governance, risk management, and compliance as developed by this group out of Arizona, the Open Compliance and Ethics Group. And that's what I'm working with and representing at GRC Solutions Korea. So we do training in those, governance, risk management, and compliance. Um, and that's very necessary here in Asia, and for reasons I'm happy to get into. Um, and then AI came around. So, 2, 3 years ago, I started working, playing around with AI personally, and then developing AI apps for risk management and compliance, stuff that I knew how to do. And that, developed into, the stage where I wanted to sell those apps to other people, other companies. And I was running up against a lot of procurement and compliance questions, stuff that I would have asked if I was still in-house. And I didn't have good answers for that in terms of risk and compliance related to those apps. And so that's how I ended up studying, and working in AI audit. So I started taking all these courses, and Babbel had some great courses, and I got qualified as an auditor. And I liked these guys so much, I joined them. So that's kind of the long route that I took towards this. It connects in my mind. It's more and more focused, but it's all about risk and compliance, whether it's with regard to AI or human resources.
Thanks, Michael. Can you unpack a risk management system for, because I have
So
it in my mind what that means, but can you describe that in a bit more detail so people have an idea of what that's all about?
sure. I mean, this is a big topic in and of itself, but basically, focusing on lawyers, for example, most lawyers are very well trained to opine on particular laws or regulations, the impact of a particular decision, kind of boundary conditions. And that's very helpful as advice. I'm distinguishing from the litigation process, but in the corporate transactions and corporate practice, a lot of it is advice, and this is what law firms tend to provide. And what you really need in-house is a system to act upon that advice and evolve as conditions change. So this is a management system. So everybody has a system, finance has a system, procurement has a system, legal needs a system. But historically, it was quite ad hoc. And the people that came into this as professionals were trained otherwise. And so the management mindset of developing a system so that the system works no matter who is tasked to it. You have people come and go, right? The people that are working in your team will come and go. Um, and the system needs to evolve. But the management system is really kind of the core of modern entities and enterprises. And so this plugs into other units, overall governance and other systems within the company. But if you don't approach it as a management system, then it really just becomes a lot of blah 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 advice,
So
and
just to
that's the problem.
clarify system, you're not talking about like an IT solution, a system as an operational
IT can be
system,
part of it, but
right?
ultimately it's the way resources are organized to get stuff done over and over again.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
an operational system, and
Yeah, an
yeah,
SOP.
yeah. And in my experience, having been in IT leadership for banks, so highly regulated, the governance and compliance system, and for me, the way I describe that is like people, process, technology, and data synced up and designed to achieve an outcome with efficiency and a high level of performance. Indeed, you have a number of dimensions to that. Like what we talk about is like the first, second, and third line of defense. So the first line of defense is having the policies and having those embedded in SOPs. So make sure that the general people in the organization aren't doing stupid things or not doing uncompliant things. And then in second line is an internal audit function, and the third line
Mhm.
is the actual external auditor or the regulator. Yeah, and because it's such a in that case it's such a formally regulated environment, maybe it's easier to have a risk management system in that place as opposed to organizations that are not externally mandated but still
Yeah,
need such a thing for all the right reasons. That like, oh, we've got to get our act together for, I don't know, GDPR, EU AI Act, or what are the other, and it doesn't have to be, legislative. It could just be, it's smart to do it. It's
yeah,
wise to
or
manage your
ESG
business like
or
this. Yeah.
AI, whatever is coming,
Yeah.
trade risk management. And there are many ways to cut it, right? So COSO has a system, ISO 31000 is a nice risk management system. The point is that you need a system. It can
Yeah.
be simple as something that you diagram out and work out on a bespoke basis. But going back to my experience in Silicon Valley and then here in Korea, startups, generally don't have a system when they're starting, right? They have different priorities, just grow,
Yeah.
right? Grow, grow, grow. And similarly, a lot of large conglomerates in Korea, names that you would know, grew very quickly in the post-war era, post-Korean War era, looking to government to lead them and support them. And so a lot of the risk management was vis-a-vis the government, right? So lobbying and otherwise getting support and being aware of government priorities, as opposed to the history of organizations elsewhere, where a lot of it was market driven, a lot of lawyers that may sue you for misstatements if you're a public company, and so there are different histories. But what happened then was Korean companies that are very, very large with broad operations globally, active, had infrastructures for compliance and risk management that were rather inadequate. And part of it is also the kind of feudal governance system that we have. So owner family, a small group of people organized, usually a family, that is running a large group of companies, via cross shareholdings and other mechanisms, without really according the proper respect and deference to the minority shareholder, and basically a little bit feudal. And internally, then what happens is all the managers look to the so-called owners, and it becomes a political,
Mm.
process. So your risk management as an executive is really managing your career vis-a-vis the owner, rather than market risk or
Yeah.
other transactional risk. So, that's
Mm.
changed, of course, and it's changing as companies venture out into larger markets and figure out that this isn't working. But there is kind of a bias towards that still. So it's very similar, startup practice and large conglomerate practice in Asia more generally.
So I guess the reason you would have a risk management system is to actually to get away from that personality driven, individual driven approach. So,
To
yeah.
professionalize it, to standardize it, and to create a system that
Yeah.
is not beholden politically.
Right. Now, now if we take this a bit further, and the topic of the conversation is the impact of AI on lawyers, particularly in-house lawyers.
Yep.
Why is this topic a passion for you?
So, given all this background on law firm lawyers versus in-house lawyers and the difference between them, of course, there are exceptions, but for in-house lawyers, they're tasked with so many things on an ongoing basis. And, whether you're a sole practitioner handling the whole, small company, or you're in a team, but the company has lots of operations and you specialize in a particular function, ultimately the systems are developed, um, and you need to do this repeatedly, efficiently, for your internal clients, using sometimes outside resources such as counsel from law firms, accountants, and other specialists. But it's a management function. So legal risk management inside of companies is not pure lawyering. It is, in fact,
hmm,
management. And so this is the big distinction that I'd like to make for in-house practice. And so, you can specialize in particular things like trade compliance and be an expert lawyer in that regard, but you're going to have to work within the organization via a system, and that's going to be a management system. And so this opportunity with AI is to address the management system. So I set aside the legal, AI for legal applications, right? So case law and precedent and contract drafting. Just looking at the management system, there's a lot of what we call legal operations that can be handled by AI, freeing the lawyer who has typically not been trained for this stuff to focus on what he or she has been trained to do, more intensively. So, all the paperwork, your colleague reviews, all the budgeting, all the KPIs, all of the stuff that any other team in the company generally needs to do as part of its operations, that can be handled very well with AI. And for legal in particular, this is very nice because we have a lot of outside vendors and parties that we work with. We have lots of transactions going through, lots of documents. AI can be very, very helpful in this regard. So I think AI, contrary to what's portrayed in a lot of the LinkedIn posts and on the media, yes, there are problems with hallucinations, but not all lawyers are litigators. Actually, for the vast majority of us, we don't ever go to court. right? And for
Mm.
in-house people, it doesn't make sense to go to court. That you're on a different schedule. You can contract that out. Um, so, the process management, the process of a litigation, or the process of a trade dispute, or training for your procurement teams regarding
So,
antitrust, all of this stuff can be helped with AI.
so if you were
Very good.
speaking to and let's answer it in two phases, a young, just starting in-house lawyer, and then we'll talk about a senior, so manager, the head of legal for an organization. For this new entrant into a company, maybe first job, what would be the and imagine they haven't dabbled much with AI yet. What would be one or two or three start here things
Sure.
for you, just to improve your operational management productivity, not making perhaps legal decisions for you,
Yeah.
but where would be the best place to start just to put your finger in the water?
That's a great question because you can do this at an individual level or at a team level, right? So
Yeah.
if you're onboarding a new lawyer, Um, the first thing he or she should do is understand the organization, the business of the organization. And in the old days, we used to read if it was a public company, 10Ks, right? And other disclosures, IPO documents,
Mm, mm,
different public disclosures that were kind of quality controlled with 10b-5, which is, material omissions and misstatements. So, rather quality controlled data that it was compressed and well written, so you could kind of acclimate yourself to the business very quickly. Then, of course, the industry, right? The competitors, the competitive landscape. So ultimately, you're a business lawyer. Of course, if you're a nonprofit, there's a little bit of a different context, but there's parallels. So understanding the industry and the business, and then the processes within the company, which are not well understood by many people in the company, not just lawyers. I went to business school, and they never taught about how organizations are actually organized in terms of what does procurement do, what does marketing do? What does HR do? What does compliance do? Who are trade compliance and what's quality control? All of this stuff needs to be understood by the lawyer because those are your internal clients, right? You're advising them on their work, enabling them to do better and to take better risks. That's the other second large aspect of this. Understanding that contrast to academic lawyers or in some cases many law firm lawyers, you're not there to eliminate risk, right? What you're
yeah,
doing
yeah.
is you're helping the organization take better risks in the pursuit of its objectives. And so you're trying to get rid of the bad risks to the extent that you can mitigate them, and working with other teams, insurance and other mechanisms to enable the organization to pursue those objectives by taking better risks. So getting that mindset is very helpful. And then thirdly, so the first one is, downloading as much information as possible. Secondly, taking a different perspective and understanding kind of the holistic uh, purpose of what you're really doing in this organization. And then finally, kind of curating your career in terms of specific areas that you may be assigned to, right? So if you're with a tech company, you may be assigned to intellectual property, or you may be doing employment, HR stuff. It depends on the size of the team, but really quickly getting acclimated and diving deep to get familiar with what you need, not to the level of an expert academic, but what's, to the level that's good enough for the organization in
Hmm.
practice.
Mm.
Um, and part of that is getting out of your office and reaching out to people. And that's the other part that's not well taught. So talking with other teams, having lunch with other teams, having coffee with other people, going out for a beer, whatever it is, to understand your internal clients and letting them know that you are there as a service provider, right? Those are the three things I would encourage younger lawyers to do, or whatever age you are, as you join an in-house team. And then, as a team, that's also something that you need to think about. I have a little matrix for this. Can I tell you?
Yeah, no, yeah, oh yeah,
Okay.
please.
So, back in the day with Rumsfeld, the known knowns, the unknown knowns. Do you remember
Hmm,
this?
hmm, hmm. Yes.
um, when they were looking for weapons of mass destruction. Anyways, so the context was that, but I kind of took that to organize my thinking around how to manage a legal team. So at the team level, the known knowns are stuff that you already have systems for, right? how to engage outside counsel for litigation, how to deal with, particular issues, how a contract form management system, training for your procurement team. These are things that you have already developed a system for. The known unknowns are things that you know you need to develop a management system for. Stuff that you need to train your
Mhm.
lawyers as well as your internal clients on, right? And part of that relates to AI. There's stuff that we already know how to do in terms of, creating risk management for AI, even though a lot of it is still a black box. Then for the unknown knowns, this is stuff other people in your organization know, but the legal team doesn't. And you need to get out of your office, walk around, and figure out what people know and what their issues are. And then you create a system together to manage that issue. And then, which leaves, the hard one, the unknown unknowns. And a lot of what, we see in AI is still out in the unknown unknowns. But that doesn't mean we ignore it, right? We prepare to become more resilient to whatever risks may be realized. So that's kind of
Yeah.
the matrix that I use to organize this work.
No, really smart. And I think coming at it from the other side, because I have been in many activities that required internal legal support and external legal support on a corporate basis. Um, and what I always suggest is like if we're setting up a new company or a new shared service function or doing a massive procurement, that there's probably legal, tax, procurement involvement. Don't wait till the last moment. I mean, it's been such a benefit to create the positive relationships, because I love to hear make better risks as opposed to
Take,
avoid
take
all
better
risks.
risks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. To take better risks is, but in order for the in-house legal team to judge that, they really need to know the context and the players, and 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 so then you also don't get into an argument about what better means, because
Yeah.
it's all a dialogue. At some point, it's a decision,
Yeah.
and usually with unknown dimensions, like, okay, we just don't know, we have to make a decision, we have to move forward. So it's no, yeah. And if you were the head of a legal department, um and you're applying this framework to that, what are just a few things that head of legal could do to
Sure.
step
I've
into the
served
age
as,
of AI now in order to accelerate performance?
I've served as general counsel for conglomerates with multiple public companies a couple of different times. And then I set one up earlier in my career 20 years ago as well. So kind of a three-time GC for large companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a management function, right? So of course you act as a lawyer and you advise the board and senior executives, but you also corral your resources and get things done. But with AI, there are the things that I pointed out with regard to operations, right? To take care of a lot of the grunt work that will then free your team to either get their other work done more efficiently and simply go home earlier. That's a big one
Mm-hmm.
for morale, because sometimes you're not in control of how much you can pay them and how many raises you can get them. So the best thing you can do for your team is to let them go home, or have some
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
flexibility, and also enable their career progression, right? Whether internal to your organization or otherwise. Um, but the big benefit to AI, I think, is to create those efficiencies and to quantify them. So you want more budget for your team, you want more resources, you want more pay, you want recognition for your team, and that's all a KPI. You can't leave it as a nebulous, oh, legal's a solid, right? They're always there for us. How much have you saved them this year,
Yeah.
right? How much have we actually gotten discounts from with regard to external counsel? What are our operations costs? This stuff is eminently you know, for AI is very good with this. So using AI to streamline your operations and to do more with less. And this is not just people, but in terms of budget. Using AI to scrutinize your vendor the bills, right? Why is this here? This is an anomaly. Um, and to push back against service providers and really need to manage that very carefully. And also demanding that if the law firms are using AI, we should share some of those benefits. You're not going to bill us on this hourly billing model if we know that in fact a lot of it was done by AI. So a
Yeah.
value based approach. So it's a good time to be in-house
Yeah.
in this regard. But finally, and most importantly, just like the initial for starting for day one lawyer, You can use AI to understand your organization better, see what more can be done. And this is continuing, right? It's not only your week one. So for the GC, it's really diving deep into the company and seeing what else can be done um, to help. And there's a limited number of hours in the day, so you can speed up that process with AI to better understand what everybody else is doing.
I absolutely love use it for operational management. With another project right now, we're advising a procurement function of a multinational, and we're just using it to research, particularly how what are the current benchmarks of how AI and analytics can support a multi-100 million procurement team.
Yeah.
What does that look like? How are they organizing? How are they planning? So you can also, I think, just
Oh,
you don't
absolutely.
have to give it
Especially,
any actual internal information. You're just saying, hey, for a company of this dimension and this kind of thing, like,
yeah,
well, what are people doing? And then one thing I didn't realize is um, well, I knew they were out there, but GPT also advised. It said, well, here's a bunch of benchmark reports out there that I'm drawing from. Here's the
yeah,
sources. So I was like, oh, well, then we can go get those benchmark reports and then
yeah.
use that, read them and then use that as a foundation for this quantified advice. Because we're talking to the chief procurement officer, and that person's going to need to argue for the funding and the budget.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is this is a no-brainer, but you definitely have to quantify that and do the
And
business case.
there are actual processes, right? So supply chain management, supplier code of conduct, counterparty due diligence, sanctions and export control compliance. All of this stuff that needs to get done can be done more easily
Yeah,
with less people. You're not going to hire some 50-year associate from a law firm to go see each of your suppliers at, I don't know what it is now, $600, $800 an hour, for a blah, blah, blah speech, right? You could just send them a chatbot along with a document, then do a conference call and explain to them your supplier code of conduct. And that saved you probably thousands of dollars right
yeah.
there for each supplier, right? So stuff like this. I mean, there's a lot of talk about problems with AI and hallucinations, and I acknowledge that. That's what I'm doing with audit, bias, all of this stuff. But there's a lot that still can be
Yeah.
done. Once you understand the probabilistic nature of the outputs of these models, what I call the demon cat from Adventure Time. Have you ever seen this cartoon?
No, I know Taco
Okay,
Cat,
so
but
there's
that's
this
something else.
cartoon called Adventure Time, and there's
Okay.
two episodes where the demon cat comes out. The demon cat has approximate knowledge of many things,
Okay.
not exact knowledge, approximate knowledge of many
Yeah.
things. And so if you add the word probably to that, that's basically what we're dealing with regard to LLMs. So if you understand that there's a demon cat lurking somewhere in these workflows and you're just aware of it, you can still get a lot done. You're not going to drop a contract
So
in and get an answer out. It's going to have an approximate
let me
understanding of what you dropped in, given parameters, prompts and structures around it, RAG, other documents. But at the end of the day, the demon cat's still there,
let me reach
right?
into Schrodinger's box and grab Demon Cat by the scruff of the neck and
Yeah.
pull it out and say, hey, because Demon Cat exists at some moment in
Yeah.
there's always a probability. What should in-house counsel never do with AI? Let's look at it the other way. Like this is an offline, just
Well,
don't
it's
do
for legal,
this.
it's always got to be human in the loop, right? Not simply on the loop. Stuff cannot go out without legal signing off at the human level. So I don't think the agents are here yet for legal work.
Can
Um,
you, so
so
in the
there's
loop,
humans
meaning
on the loop where they're kind of watching all the time.
every word needs to be read. Is that what you
Every
mean?
output, every
Every,
output,
okay.
every output that goes out, your work product, and that's your professional responsibility.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's a licensing requirement in most jurisdictions as well. So you need to be responsible for your output. So this human in the loop out without your okay is I think a minimum. I think it's also a minimum and a professional responsibility for lawyers to understand how AI works, right? The demon cat basically, and
Okay.
and the fact that the demon cat is there in all models. So if you look at OpenAI's service terms, if you look at Anthropic service terms, if you go into the contract, OpenAI and Anthropic's lawyers have identified the demon cat as a disclaimer on their end, right? And this is underlying pretty much all models. So open source, we'll set that aside because there's no backstop in some of these in terms of corporate entity service provider and so on from the from a corporate perspective. So individually, you may have some different risk tolerances, but if you're going to run this function for an organization of any size, you need to very well recognize where the demon cat is and how it's going to impact your workflows.
Well, based on demon cat in terms of service and contracts with these open AIs and Anthropics, et cetera, what's your personal principle on putting company information in GPT?
It's a very good question, especially now because there's a particular case in New York, OpenAI in the New York Times, where Plus and Pro accounts, they're holding these chats and conversations because a judge ordered them to. So other than enterprise and education accounts, they're being saved, and so this is a large uncertainty.
Saved and subpoenaed, you mean?
Saved so that if the judge orders in particular litigation, you can actually get access to those conversations, whether you turned off your save conversation or not, whether you're in anonymous mode or not. So this has really put a wrench into particularly OpenAI, but this is an open question. So I believe that, for the time being, you need to be very careful. And that's why I focus on operations as opposed to work product for today. I think it can be very helpful for anonymized kind of brainstorming, research, and kind of gathering inputs. But I don't think it's yet there. Again, contrary to what a lot of service providers that have created these models for sale to legal teams have stated, both on the confidentiality, because underneath this, there's still the demon cat, right? So if it's OpenAI, this is a problem. And then in terms of the larger picture of kind of over relying on these technologies, unless you have good management systems already in place, it's going to go awry very quickly. So it's human nature, right? It's you want to get things done. You have a lot of pressure. You're trying to get work out the door. And if you don't have a quality control system, which is a management system around your work product, then the tendencies will be to cut corners. And if you're cutting corners, the demon cat will show its head.
Well, also the level of quality will go down, because if you're just spitting out, GPT product without context, without crafting, without QA, you will suffer from that. So before we get into the question around like how could we prepare, because you mentioned at some point that the lawyers need to understand how AI works. I'm curious about from an education perspective around lawyers. What I often hear, and I have mixed emotions about, is, well, you can't use GPT, but it's okay to use Copilot Enterprise. It's safe because it's Microsoft. And I'm like,
yeah, but under
really
Microsoft's offering, if you go deep to look in, the demon cat's still in there.
Yeah, well, yeah, the probability error demon cat is still there, but
the technology is the same.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's Anthropic or Microsoft, or there are systems put around it, boundaries and quality controls, but the risk is still there. And if you look into the documentation, their internal legal teams have identified the risk and have disclaimed it. Right? I mean, they're telling you it's there. You just need to know where to look. So you cannot assume that these uncertainties have been handled. But at the same time, you can't wait, right? You take advantage of these technologies. You just need to mitigate against them. And the mitigation may not only be a technical mitigation, right? It may be training your people. It may be putting in workflows that have senior kind of persons signing off on this. It may be explicitly putting responsibility on people, right? Accountability. So for myself too, in my custom instructions on all my AI, I asked it to remind me at the end of every interaction, final liability, lies with the human.
Oh,
and
wow,
so it
really?
tells me with every output, because I also, tend to, human being, right? So you're going to move forward with some of this, but that last reminder that, hey, this is, it's on you. So things like this, I think, are helpful. But the education is, not only the literacy required by the EU AI Act, but just understanding a little bit more about how these systems are not simply software in the traditional sense, the probabilistic nature, the dangers of biases, what this potentially means, what are the potential consequences, and what are your company's, your employer's policies on this, right? And for the employer, they need to promulgate those policies and let their employees know. Because if they don't promulgate policies, the employees are already using AI anyways, right? Which
Yeah,
they call
it's already
shadow AI.
happening.
Right?
Just
Yeah, so they're going to use it anyway. So it's um it's very important that you educate. And I have a I don't know, I hesitate because this is a public podcast, but it's like sex education, right? So with your children, you need to let them know how this all works. And not addressing it is not going to make the risk go away. Um, so I hope that wasn't too inappropriate. But
no,
I
yeah,
think
you can't put your head
it's
in the
right.
ground. It's
Yeah.
happening anyways, and so you might as well get
It's
it
going to
done.
happen anyway. So they should understand the consequences, the
Yeah.
ramifications, how to treat this technology with respect, people with respect. It's the same idea. And so I think that that's why these management systems are what I keep harping upon, because this is all part and parcel of that. Um, and
So
ultimately, going back to your original question, for the GC, as the head of, that function, as a manager, as an executive, this is his or her primary function in terms of guiding the organization, the board, and the internal clients towards a better understanding of these technologies and mitigations of these risks.
now, specifically in the context of education, maybe for people who are in law school now or aspiring to, like my son,
Yeah,
um, or if you're already in the role, what would you recommend as far as to up your game now to know that the powers and the potentials as well as the risks of
sure.
this? To understand maybe the technology, the use cases. Um,
Okay.
what do you wish for the legal profession to be educated on related to AI at the moment?
Okay, so I'll kind of parse it in two ways. Um, for the student, the temptation, as in every other discipline, is to use AI to shortcut your education, right? And to just plow through it very, very quickly when you're in law school, doing case briefs with AI, figuring out the holding with AI. And I understand the temptation to do that, but the law school or whatever the institutional mechanism in your jurisdiction is, um, the process has been designed to create kind of a way of thinking and a discipline, issue, rule, application, conclusion, which is the general kind of legal mindset. Um, and if you're going to short circuit that and simply try to get through law school and take the bar exam or whatever the equivalent is in your jurisdiction, you're not going to be prepared for practice because that loop, that algorithm actually is not, embedded in your mind, right? So those mental models are not there for you. And so, if you're going to try to contract that out to AI, you're going to have the AI lead you by the nose. So ultimately, for any professional, you need to own the mental model, you need to own the chain of thought and impose it on the AI, lead it, use it, use it to augment your thinking and to test your thinking, but you need to be driving this. And for the students that short circuit their education in this way, and I get it, why you would want to do this, because on a day-to-day basis it makes so much sense. But looking towards the future, you need to put those building blocks into place. And then for practice, um, on a professional level, many law schools, at least in the US, are primed uh, to funnel lawyers into law firms. And I think young professionals need to look at that very hard because the law firms are set up on a billing model for the most part that is using the associates to bill in a pyramid, right? And then even if you become partner, there's still basically there are three types of law firm lawyers: the finders, minders, and grinders. All associates are by definition grinders. Finders are the ones who originate clients. Minders manage, right? And even amongst the partnership, if you don't have a book of clients, you're a grinder. You're basically a glorified associate, right? Or handling administrative work. Um, so understanding that ecosystem and what you're getting into, and the fact that if AI is deployed more broadly, not only by law firms but by their clients, then the grinding function and that billing model is quite tenuous.
Hmm.
And so, they need to think about the business realities of what their profession is. and whether it is true, remains true that law firms will be a stable path for your career. And whether you become partner, and then you hopefully you'll become a finder, so you can have clients of your own. Otherwise, if you're still a grinder, then yeah, you're a partner that is really an associate. So this kind of business reality, and then the opportunities to go in-house, I think will become uh, more dear, in that it's going to be very competitive to go in-house, because in-house there's a stability, there's other aspects to this kind of
So
work.
let me ask a potentially very nasty question before we wrap up. But in my world, which is technology, I have proactively advised my children not to pursue a education in software development and engineering because it's done.
Hmm.
AI has disrupted this, and there's a whole discussion around that and on what does that mean for us. But would you
Hmm.
recommend people to go into the legal profession? Is this something that's still viable, or would you do it with certain caveats?
No, I think it is. Because the legal license is kind of broadly applicable. So, you can go into litigation, you can go traditional practice, or you can go in-house, you can open your own shop, you can develop AI software. There's a lot of
Oh
different
yeah.
things. So, for example, my son is a lawyer in a state government in the buildings department, handling sewage and grid connections. And I told him, basically you're an AI infrastructure lawyer, right? Water and energy is AI. So there's many ways you can go with law, and so that's the benefit. And there's still some guild protections and so on, so barriers to entry. But I think the benefit in the age of AI, so drilling down to the technology, is that one, lawyers are trained to be wordsmiths, right? So we're really good at word association, which is what LLMs do. So we are natural prompters, and we should be able to get the LLMs to do very, very well once we understand the limitations and kind of parameters of how to work with these LLMs, which doesn't take forever. But we're actually well prepared to prompt, as other disciplines may be as well. I think there are also benefits to, kind of uh, creative education, and all of this will be, augmented with AI. Coding, I'm kind of ambivalent because I'm 55 this year, but I'm going backwards because of the AI audit and the things that I'm doing. I'm now trying to learn more about computer science belatedly, building on kind of operations research, linear algebra from 30 something years ago to understand the matrices and so on. But if I was a young person starting out, I would hedge, right? Do this. So computer science, minor, major philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Something broad
Hmm.
that really helps you build mental models so that you develop the stubbornness, the grit to be able to impose it on an LLM, because it's going to be hard. It's going to be
And they're
very
going to get
hard
smarter, and they're
to
going to get
resist.
more
Yeah,
rascally as well as things
yeah.
go on. So
So I think having that discipline,
yeah.
philosophy, math, other disciplines, and creative endeavors as well, because you just think different.
And creative meaning on, because this is one of the things with LLMs is innovative thought. Like truly innovative thought is somewhat out of the bounds for them because it's unless it's a total hallucination and it's accidental. Um, the idea of how to create new value and then use AI and LLMs for that. And I think that that's like you said, make software for legal and
Yeah.
apply it in new and innovative in different ways.
I think the
So
onus is on the user, right? You have to
yeah,
prompt it in the right way.
yeah. Well, the and this is from me for the management flip, meaning before the managers knew the answers, and now the answers are commoditized. And so then the question is, who's in the best place to know the question, the prompt, in order to get the right answer applied to the right situation? So,
And
um,
and lawyers are particularly good at the questions.
yeah, no, it's great. So,
So it's like, these large libraries. I don't know if anybody goes to libraries anymore, but large university libraries with millions of volumes, you got to find the book.
yeah, yeah,
So, if you have a really good research librarian that you can talk to, that will really make a difference. But you can't just wander the stacks.
no, exactly. So have some discipline and have a strategy around it, and like you said, when you're in law school, go through the motion of the work. So you build that muscle in your brain to understand the
build the discipline.
Yeah. Well, like I recently with my older son, his gaming machine crapped out, and we went through the whole process of, okay, what's reusable? How do you troubleshoot it? And the mental process of troubleshooting tech in hardware as well, which is, a hardware operating system application. It was great. And later he reflected, he says, like, I now look at these machines differently. He understands every component piece, what the interaction is. He understands the logic of deciding how to troubleshoot, how to implement, what are the different options of swapping things. And I know and I think having that kind of awareness of what LLMs can do for you will really be empowering as well.
And this is for across disciplines, right? So in shipbuilding, you have commissioning, this punch list before the system is signed off on. Understanding that process as a human being enables you then to use AI to make that more efficient, right? In shipbuilding or steel manufacturing or an artistic endeavor. But you really need to build those mental models for yourself.
So
otherwise, you're going to be led by the nose.
No, exactly. So understand AI to improve your productivity. Be the human in the loop, because you're responsible for your output, and do all this so you can go home early is what I took from all
Yep. And explore other options, right?
Yeah.
Go do yoga or something.
Yeah.
Or interview for other jobs if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
But basically, it empowers the human.
Michael Paik, thank you so much for this. I will include links to your LinkedIn, to Bobble, to GRC Solutions, all in the show notes. And if anyone is really inspired by this, well, as you can tell, what a joy to engage with you, and what a source of knowledge and wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. Visit ebullient.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player.